Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, Izuku the Ghost Rider, written by Kyodon. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin. Today was not a good day for Izuku. Well, most days were not good days for Izuku, but this one was really bad. To start, his teacher had announced his longing to go to you, which had the expected result that is everyone but his sister laughing and Bakugo getting sad. Then Bakugo told him, "Jump off the roof and hope you get born with a quirk in your next life." Which was just a whole other level for him, which his sister was happy to yell at him while she used her quirk to throw him out a window. Luckily Bakugo used his quirk to stop his fall, but as you can probably guess, she got in trouble and now Izuku had to walk home alone while she sat in after-school detention. Of course, nothing was ever easy for Izuku, and villain came and tried to suffocate him and steal his body. Fortunately, All Might came and dealt with the villain, and Izuku wasn't sure if he fainted from lack of air or from the sheer excitement of All Might being here. Things went even further downhill, somehow, when Izuku took a ride on All Might's leg and learned that the symbol of peace was not as he seemed. After promising not to tell anyone, Izuku asked him something he had been wanting to ask him for years. "Can I be a hero? Even though I'm quirkless?" No. This wasn't exactly what the hero said. But to Izuku it's all that mattered. All of All Might's attempts to soften the blow fell on deaf ears. After all Might left, he felt numb. All he ever wanted was to be a hero. To stop being so weak. To stop being a Deku. But now that already impossible dream had been crushed, and all he was left with a feeling of uselessness and depression. Mindlessly he walked back to school to pick up his sister when his eyes caught sight of the roof. "Jump off the roof and hope you get born with a quirk in your next life." Bakugo's words came to mind, and the next thing he knew he was on the roof looking down. At this point, all I am is a hindrance. Izuka got in trouble because of me. Mom won't have to work those extra hours to support 2 kids. Izuka, I'm sorry. Take care of Mom. And with the fell. A few minutes later with Izuka. Izuka walked down the halls, absolutely said, "I swear when I get my hands on Bakugo I'm gonna snap his freaking neck." She muttered, walking down the halls. Izuku is probably already home. Better get there and make sure he's okay. Izuka walked out the main entrance and her heart dropped to her stomach. No. No. Please no. Izuku. Right in front of the school was her brother. Laying in a pool of his own blood. It was pretty evident what happened. Tears streamed down poor Izuka's face as she feels to her knees in front of her now dead brother. And so she did then the only thing she could do. She screamed. A week later not many people came to Izuku's funeral. It was just his family and the Bakugos. Inko was a mess. She hadn't stopped crying since she received the news. Throughout the entire event, Izuka never stopped glaring at Bakugo, and when everyone else was distracted she cornered him. "I could tell them about what you said," Izuka said emotionlessly. "Why didn't you?" Bakugo asked just as emotionlessly, the shock of being responsible for someone's death still sinking in. "Because that's not what Izuku would have wanted. Because he wanted you to be a hero. And even though you'll never be one, I'll let you pretend. Just know that I will be number one. Just so that way, you can't be." Bakugo said nothing. "But I just want to make this clear. You killed my brother. I will never forgive you. I will never let you forget what you are. A goddamn murderer." Izuka was starting to lose her cool as tears slid down her face. Bakugo looked down and said nothing. Izuka glared at him before walking away. Tears still in her eyes, leaving Bakugo by himself. Izuku opened his eyes and found himself floating in an endless black void. Is this the afterlife? Well, yes and no, came a demonic voice. Izuku looked around in panic, but he found nothing. "Don't bother. I am not physically there, but rather I have pulled you into a space known as purgatory. Where we can speak. Purgatory. Izuku asked. Yes, purgatory. It is a place beyond heaven, hell, and the land of the living. Normally someone like you would simply go directly to heaven. However, I have an offer you may be interested in. An offer? Wait, are you the devil? Izuku asked. The voice let out a demonic laugh that shook the infinite space he was in. Very good. Yes, I am the being you call. The devil. Izuku was in shock. Thousands of questions ran through his head, but the one that repeated the most was, what does the devil want with me? Like I said, I want to make you an offer. Izuku's eyes widened. He can read my thoughts. I'm the devil. Of course, I can read your thoughts. Oh. Izuku felt dumb. Anyway, I don't like to waste time, so I'll lay everything out for you. I can give you the power to be, well, not a hero but someone who saves people and fights bad guys. A vigilante. Izuku was intrigued despite himself. He had been told the same thing all other children were told about making deals with the devil, that it never ends well and that you'll always suffer in the end. But to Izuku, not being able to help people was already suffering. Yes. Don't worry, you'll be far too strong to catch. Even All Might would be unable to beat you. He would be stronger than All Might. Regardless, the power I offer is that of the spirit of vengeance. A fallen angel. You will receive great strength, speed, and endurance. Eating, sleeping, drinking, will all be unnecessary. You will be able to summon the flames of hell and burn the souls of the guilty with your gaze. And lastly, every time innocent blood is spilled you will know. With its power, you will be an unstable force of justice and you will save countless lives. All of this was music to Izuku's ears. He almost accepted right there and then. Excerpt: one thing came to mind. What will it cost? All I ask is that you send the souls of those who would bring harm upon the innocent directly to me. You want me to kill them? In hindsight, considering who he was talking to, this should have been obvious. But still, killing was something that heroes could only do under extreme circumstances. And it wasn't something Izuku ever wanted to do. A bit hesitant, huh? Well, perhaps you require some persuasion. Suddenly Izuku could see countless people suffering, screaming, dying. And then it stopped. In a single moment. 34 people were just killed. 23 people were tortured. And that was just Japan. Tell me, Izuku Midoriya, will you just let them suffer? When you could help. I accept. The devil laughed once more. Good. Good. However, there is one more thing you must give up. I don't care. Izuku screamed, interrupting the devil. I can't. I can't let them suffer. I refuse to let them suffer. I won't be useless anymore. Take my soul. Take everything. Just give me the power. Give me the power to help people. A tear streamed down Izuku's face and fell into the void as the two were silent until the devil laughed once more. But it wasn't the amused laugh he let out before. This one was far more sinister. As you wish. Then Izuku saw a light. The light came closer and Izuku was able to make out what it was. A flame. The fire crashed into him and engulfed him. The graveyard a month after the funeral. The grave of Izuku Midoriya was alight as a pillar of flame burst from his coffin. A hand came up and grabbed on to the dirt surrounding him and Izuku Midoriya rose from his grave. He stood up and looked around him and his eyes landed on something that was distinctly out of place. A motorcycle. Parked right next to his grave. On top of the motorcycle was a white shirt and green hoodie as well as a pair of jeans and cleats. Next to the bike was a chain. Izuku walked closer to it and a note appeared. Dear Izuku. The spirit of vengeance requires a mount. So I have given you one. Also, I doubt you wanted to walk around naked, so I provided some clothes. You're welcome. As for the chain, well, it was the weapon of choice for the previous Ghost Rider. I figured you could make use of it. Oh, and about the whole knowing about whenever the blood of the innocent is spilled. That only extends to whatever city you're in and will only be one at a time. Otherwise, you would go insane. Sincerely, the devil. The note burst into flames and disappears. Izuku quickly realized he was naked and changed into the clothes as quickly as possible. After he was dressed, he took a closer look at the motorcycle. It was small for a motorbike. As if it was made for him specifically, which, considering who made it, was probably the case. It was mostly black with some green highlights and looked like something a rich person would own. Okay. So how do I ride this? Izuku picked up the chain and slung it over his shoulder before sitting down on the bike. Strangely, it felt familiar. As if he had done it 1,000 times before. Did these powers come with the knowledge to ride motorcycles? I mean, if it's required to be the spirit of vengeance, I guess it makes sense. Izuku sat on the bike and gripped the controls, getting the feel of things. Okay. What do I do now? He looked back at his burned grave and a thought came to his mind. I've been dead. For a month. Oh God. Mom. Izuka. As soon as he realized this, he sped off towards his house. Speeding down the roads, Izuku didn't really care about abiding the road laws. Mom. Izuka. I'm sorry. I probably made you two worry so much. I swear. I'll make it up to you. Somehow. As Izuku came closer to his house, he saw something that made his heart drop. Flames. Izuku rocketed towards his house, reaching it in minutes. He threw his bike to the side and ran into the burning house. The flames not hurting him whatsoever. Mom. Izuka. Is anyone here? He heard a coughing sound. Rushing to the noise, Izuku found a horrific sight. His mother. Covered in burns. Underneath a piece of burning roof. No. No. Mom. Izuku threw the piece of wood off her and lifted her up. He smashed the burning wall to bits and carried his mother outside. Setting her down, he took off his hoodie and used it to put out the flames. Once that was done, he crouched down. Mom. Mom. Please. No. Don't die. She coughed and opened her eyes. Izuku. Is that you? Yes. Mom. It's me. I came back. Where's Izuka? She was out. Doing something. Izuku sighed in relief. No, his sister was okay. Mom. It's gonna be okay. Just save your breath, I'm gonna get you to a hospital. Izuku. Mom, please save your dash. Izuki's it really you? Inko asked, tears streaming down her burnt eyes. Yes, Mom, it's really me. A smile came to Inko's lips. I'm so glad. Izuku. I'm sorry. Those were the last words she said. Before her body went limp. Mom. 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 Mom, please. It was no use. Izuku Midoriya was no more. No. Izuku screamed in rage and sadness as he hugged the body of his dead mother, begging her to come back. Then, as if it was whispered in his ears, a memory came to mind. Good. Good. However, there is one more thing you must give up. I don't care. Izuku realized now what had just happened. This was all his fault. From all across the city could be heard a wail of pure rage. Meanwhile, in the Yakuza base. Eri. It's time. Came the voice of Chisaki Kai, a Overhaul leader of the Yakuza. A little girl with pure white hair and horn, dressed in a simple hospital gown, looked up in fear but didn't run. Running only made it worse. His hand touched her. And her blood was spilled. All across the wall. Back with Izuku. He felt it. Innocent blood had been spilled. All his rage, all his anger, burned inside of him as the flames encircled him, forming a cyclone of fire around him. When he emerged, instead of a green child there stood a flaming skeleton. He picked up his hoodie and put it back on. The hoodie along with the rest of his clothes, not catching fire. He called his bike, and as it came to him it transformed, turning into a motorcycle made of bone, burnt metal, and fire. He hopped on, and at unparalleled speeds, he raced towards the source of the bloodshed. Now with burning anger, Izuku Midoriya had become the spirit of vengeance and was headed to take his anger on whoever had the nerve to harm the innocent. And may God help whoever got in his way. The Yakuza. A group that was driven into becoming a shell of its former self by the rise of heroes was now attempting to re-establish itself as a powerful force to be reckoned with. Unfortunately for them, there was something even older and even more powerful coming to re-establish itself by sending them all to pits of hell. Izuku crashed through the gates with full force, alarming the Yakuza who were charged with guarding the door. Izuku parked his bike and walked towards the startled Yakuza members. "Who are you? What are you? Why are you here?" Izuku said nothing as he let out a stream of green fire from his mouth, burning them all to the bone. Walking past their burning corpses, Izuku punched through the front door. The place looked like an ordinary house, and if you didn't know any better you would think it was. However, Izuku knows that blood was spilled, and he knows where. Punching through the secret entrance, he was met with more Yakuza goons who were burnt to a crisp the second they showed their faces. Meanwhile, deeper in the base. "Overhaul. We are under attack," yelled Chronostasis, or just Chrono. "Oh. By who?" asked Overhaul, still collecting Ares' blood. "I don't know. But he's burning our men to ashes," Chrono said. Overhaul sighed. "Another vigilante then. Fine, send the trio of garbage." Back with Izuku. Izuku walked through the base, burning whoever got in his was, until suddenly he felt his chain disappear. Looking for this. Izuku looked in front of him to see Toya Setsuno holding his chain. Next to him were Yuhojo and Soromitsu Tabe. Together with their quirks larceny, crystallization, and food. They make some formidable foes. Or at least they would be if they were not literally fighting a fallen angel. "I don't know where the F you came from, but you chose the wrong group to F with," Toya yelled. "You sent out his crystals at Izuku to try and damage him, but they simply smashed into him and broke off without leaving a scratch." "Impossible," you yelled. Tabe then took his turn and lunged at Izuku, intent on eating him alive. Izuku stood still as his teeth clenched around his bones. And did absolutely nothing. "What?" yelled out the other two in shock. Tabe, still trying to eat Izuku, kept biting down on his arm until suddenly Izuku stuck his hand in his mouth and let out a blast of green flames. Tabe was reduced to ash in a second. The other two were in shock at how easily their friend was killed. Izuku turned to them and walked forward. Back with Overhaul. "They're dead," Chrono said, looking disbelievingly at the cameras. "What?" asked Overhaul, who up till now hadn't paid this matter any mind. "They're dead. He killed them in seconds," Chrono reiterated. "That BSTRD. He thinks he can F with us," Mimic yelled, giving Izuku the death stare from the monitor. Overhaul groaned. "God damn it. Send the rest of the disposables. Except for Shin. And Mimic get the trigger just in case." Back with Izuku. As Izuku walked deep into the base, he had a feeling he was being watched. He looked up to see another Yakuza, Didoro Sakaki, drinking away. "Hey. You're supposed to be getting woozy," slurred the drunk. "It appears he is immune your quirk." "How bothersome," said a calm voice on the other side of the wall. Suddenly Izuku was flung through a wall as the Yakuza member Rikiya Katsukame tackled him. In response, Izuku breathed fire on the huge man, causing him to throw Izuku off of him and into a wall. "Ha!" he yelled as the flames spread. Izuku got up, still not a scratch on him, and hurled a fireball at the man, however it was blocked by some kind of invisible force field. "Impressive. But not enough," said another Yakuza member, Hikiji Tengari. Standing beside him was another huge man named Kendo Rappa. "Well, are you going to do something?" Hikiji asked, looking at Rappa. "No. Ganging up 3-1 ain't right," Rappa said. Hikiji scoffed. "Useless. I'll be sure to inform Overhaul when smashed." The two men looked back at Izuku to see that he had broken through the force field with a single punch. "What?" Hikiji gasped. Rikiya got back up and attempted to punch him, but Izuku caught the punch head on, stopping it in its tracks. "What?" Rikiya cried. "You're literally just a pile of flaming bones. How are you so strong?" Izuku didn't bother answering as he lifted the villain up by his fist and threw him around into the wall. Izuku grabbed his chain and ignited it before unfolding it. Then in one fell swoop he slashed it across the villain's body, the hot metal cutting through his body like butter, bisecting him. Hikiji staggered back. "Rappa! Do something, you oaf!" Rappa shrugged. Rappa grabbed Hikiji by the head and threw him at Izuku's feet. "All yours!" Rappa cheered. "Why you? Traitor!" Hikiji yelled. "You'll get yours, Rappa, you'll dash." He didn't have the chance to say any more before he was consumed by flames. "Finally," Rappa said. "A one-on-one fight to the death." The Goliath cracked his knuckles. "It's just me and you, Skeletor. Why don't you lose the chain so we can fight like men?" Izuku looked at his chain before deciding to drop it. Rappa smiled. "All right. Let's get this party started." "Rah!" Rappa charged. Back with Overhaul. Overhaul turned away from the monitor. "All right, Mimic, you have a few seconds at best." "Are you ready?" Overhaul asked. "I am ready to crush this ant," Mimic cried, his voice seemingly coming from the walls. Overhaul nodded. "Good. Chrono. Go get Eri. We can't risk her getting out of our hands." Back with Izuku. Rappa lay in a pool of his own blood burns lining his body. "You are strong alight," Rappa painted. Izuku said nothing as he opened his jaw. Rappa laughed. "If this is how I go. Good." Without another word, Izuku set his body alight. Izuku went to pick up his chain, and as he bent down, a bottle was smashed against his head. He looked up to see that Sakaki was hanging from the ceiling. "Come on, fight me, you bitch." A fireball cut off his sentence as he fell to the ground, his body turning into a flaming pile of crumpled flesh. Izuku walked away, leaving one body and 3 piles of ash. On any other day, Izuku would have been horrified at such gruesome sights, but whether it be the natural apathy that comes from being the spirit of vengeance or the burning rage he still felt from seeing his mother die, he no longer cared. All that mattered was making them pay. Izuku walked down the empty halls of Yakuza base. All the Yakuza who had been here went up to try and stop him and had been incinerated. As Izuku walked further down the halls, he got the feeling of being watched once more. If you're going to attack, do it now. Then the halls closed in. The entire section of the base closed in and attempted to crush him. Mimic's laugh echoed. "Ha! That's right. Now prepare to die. You think you can look down on us? You piece of SHT. The Yakuza will rise up once more and you will be a stain on our halls. Now die." The halls closed in even further, to the point where Mimic could no longer see Izuku. Mimic laughed even harder. Until he saw a green light. "What?" Then the light grew brighter and brighter. And then he burned. Back with Overhaul. Boom. A large explosion shook the entire facility. Was that Mimic? Asked Shin Nemoto, another member of Yakuza, which now consisted of 3 people. Chrono nodded, holding Eri in his arms. That probably means either Mimic killed him or I killed Mimic. The 3 looked back to see Izuku standing there, his clothes slightly torn. Shin wasted no time and used his quirk, confession. Who are you? I am the spirit of vengeance, Izuku said without meaning to. Must be his quirk. DMN. It seems like my quirk doesn't work on him. Shin said, not knowing Izuku was telling the truth. But let's see if he's so tough after this. The plague doctor look-alike pulled out a shotgun and fired a cluster of quirk-erasing bullets at Izuku. The quirk-easing bullets went right through his clothes and between his ribs, where they were quickly destroyed by the fire. The room was dead silent as the Yakuza realized that the person in front of them was actually a skeleton and immune to their bullets. Well, it seems like you're going to be troublesome. Overhaul said, removing his gloves. Chrono. Get Eri away from here. I'll deal with him personally. Chrono nodded and tried to run out of the room, but Izuku was having none of it. Izuku summoned his bike, which appeared next to him in an instant and rocketed past Chrono, blocking his path. What the hell? Chrono shouted. Overhaul sked and touched the ground. Suddenly the concrete floor beneath them disappeared, and in an instant, it turned into spikes that rammed themselves into Izuku. However, they didn't actually hurt him, as they all just broke the second they came into contact with Izuku. Izuku took out his chain and swept the room, destroying the rest of the spikes. However, Overhaul and his minions were nowhere to be found. It was no use, however, as he had spilled the blood of innocent. No matter where he went, Izuku could find him. However, something was off. For a few seconds, Overhaul would just disappear from Izuku's radar, only to reappear. Izuku looked down at the shotgun that the Yakuza used. They probably dropped it after seeing how useless it was against him. Bad move. Izuku picked up the weapon, and as he held it in his hand, the flames enveloped it and it was transformed. Now it was black and green and had skulls and flames painted across its cannon. New weapon in hand, Izuku went to kill Overhaul. He didn't have to go far, as suddenly the entire base began to shake. He felt the base move upwards as if it was being lifted out of the ground. Izuku summoned his bike and hopped on, rocketing out of the Yakuza's base in record time just as it was leaving the ground. Izuku burst out of the base and onto the streets and looked up. And in front of him was what could only be described as a monster. Overhaul's top half was now fused with some kind of bird-like monster made of flesh, metal, and concrete, and was the size of a skyscraper. His mask was fused with his face, and if you looked close enough you could see several other masks on the monstrosity. His quirk. It lets him take things apart and put them back together. Did he put the other Yakuza members back together and fuse them into his body? Until now Izuku had been running on rage, too angry to even think properly, but the sight of this abomination brought him back to his senses. Overhaul looked down at Izuku and let out a monstrous scream. Rah! The monster shot a tendril the size of a building out from his body right at Izuku in an attempt to kill him right there and then. Thinking quickly, Izuku pulled out his new shotgun and fired it at the attack. Boom! The tendril was destroyed, sending bits of it falling to the ground, but just as quickly as it went it grew back. He must be using his quirk to heal himself. How am I gonna beat him? Overhaul didn't give him the time to think as he sent 4 more tendrils at Izuku. Izuku ramped up his bike and dodged the attack and started circling Overhaul. Come on, think. Wait. When he turned the ground into spike, he had to touch the floor first. He must need to use his hands to use his quirk. If I can get rid of his hands, then he won't be able to regenerate. Izuku looked up at the enormous monster and at Overhaul's top half located at the very top. Now I just need to figure out how to get there. Another tendril came down to try and squash him, and Izuku got an idea. Izuku dodged the attack before taking his chain and wrapping it around the concrete tendril. Then he turned his bike around and pulled with all his might, throwing himself and his bike high into the air and landing on Overhaul. Perfect. It wouldn't be so easy though. The ground Izuku was riding on rose up and more tendrils surrounded him. Izuku took his chain and flared it in a circle, cutting down any tendrils that got in his way as he neared Overhaul's upper half. Suddenly Izuku was in the air, falling along with his bike as the part of Overhaul he was riding on disappeared. What? Izuku fell and another tendril came and smacked him down further into a crater. Overhaul sent more and more tendrils to pummel and crush Izuku into bone marrow. Before he could, another massive explosion destroyed all the tendrils, forcing Overhaul to have to regenerate. In the crater was Izuku holding up his shotgun. Small cracks had formed in his skull and his bike was on its side next to him. Climbing him isn't going to work. I need to find another way quick. A few more attacks like that and I'm done for. Izuku looked up at Overhaul and saw something above him. News helicopters. That's it. Izuku picked up his bike and sat back on. Overhaul, not wasting any more time, sent another tendril down to attack Izuku, which Izuku dogged before performing the same maneuver as last time, landing back on Overhaul. Overhaul makes that part of him disappear, but Izuku is ready this time and uses his flames to boost himself in the air before taking his chain and latching it to one of the news copters circling the two and pulls himself higher into the air. Overhaul sees this and tries to attack the helicopter with one of his tendrils, but Izuku shoots its base with his shotgun, causing it to collapse. Izuku rockets into the air past the helicopter, high into the air. Overhaul panicked and sent a dozen tendrils at him all at once. Izuku used his chain and pulled himself down onto one of the tendrils, narrowly avoiding another one. Then he destroyed two more tendrils by slicing them with his chain and destroyed three oncoming ones with his gun. In a last-ditch effort, Overhaul formed an enormous bird head and swallowed Izuku whole. This didn't last, however, as a bright green light leaked from the head's mouth and cracks formed all over it until it exploded, leaving a cloud of green flames. And from that cloud came Izuku's chain as it wrapped around Overhaul's waist. And before Overhaul could react, his entire top half was ripped off and flung directly at Izuku. Overhaul and Izuku met in the middle of the sky. The last thing Overhaul heard was burn. Izuku opened his jaw and released a massive torrent of emerald flame, reducing the leader of the Yakuza to ash in the wind. As the flames died down, Izuku let himself fall. He hit the ground with a thud, creating a smaller crater in the massive hole where the Yakuza base once was, and he looked up as Overhaul's monster body fell apart and came crashing down. Izuku's entire body hurt. This was so much worse than anything Bakugo had done to him. He wasn't sure if it was emotional exhaustion or physical exhaustion, but he really wanted to shut his eyes. Wait. What happened to the little girl? With Chrono and Eri. Kai had lost. He had lost and was dead. As was all of Yakuza now. All except him. He was here alone with Eri in a secret lab a few miles away from the base. It was just him. And it was all that thing's fault. Kai. I swear I will avenge you. He looked at Eri, walked up to the scared girl. First things first, I will need to create a new formula for taking quirks. One that will work on that thing. He said, taking off his hood, revealing his clock hand hair. Eri backed away slowly and closed her eyes as his hair extended and cut her arm, spilling her blood on his hair. Perfect. Now to get to work. Oh, and don't think of running away, you'll be slowed down for quite some time, so dash, knock knock. Chrono turned his head towards the door. That's impossible. The only people who know of this location are Yakuza members, and they are all dead. Unless, the door burst open and Izuku walked in, terrifying the occupants of the room. How? Chrono yelled. How did you find me? Whenever the blood of the innocent is spilled, I will come. Chrono looked at Eri, realizing what he meant. Innocent. That girl is a monster. Izuku grabbed him by the throat, cutting him off. There are only two monsters here. You. And me. And with that, the last of the Yakuza was turned to ash. Izuku turned his gaze to the terrified girl who was now freed of Chrono's quirk and quivering in fear in the corner. Izuku walked up to the girl and crouched down beside her. Eri closed her eyes again and waited for the pain. But it never came. "Are you okay?" asked a gentle voice. Eri opened her eyes, and where the skeleton once was instead was a green-haired boy. His face was covered in cut and bruises, and the side of his head was bleeding pretty badly. His eyes looked tired but also contained something Eri had not seen before. Genuine concern. Eri didn't know what was going on, so she just nodded her head. "Good." And with that Izuku fell over and passed out. Izuku was back at his house sitting on his sofa. "What?" Izuku looked around and got up. He walked into the kitchen, and there he saw his mother working away inside the kitchen like she never died. "Mom." Izuku started running towards her, but before he could even make it 2 steps before he heard something. Fire. Izuku looked behind him and saw that his footsteps left a trail of green flames. No. No, no, no. It was then Izuku noticed her was not in his human form but rather his demonic one. More flames spread from his feet as they started to engulf the house. But Inko continued cooking like nothing was wrong. "Mom, run." Izuku reached out to grab his mother, but the second he touched her she burst into flames. No. Back in the real world, no. Izuku awoke with a jolt, shifting into his demonic form. Izuku breathed heavily despite this form not needing air. He looked around and realized that it was just a nightmare. Except it wasn't really. His mother was still dead. And it was still his fault. Izuku shifted back into human form. Tears started rolling down his face as he began to cry. While killing the Yakuza had served as a good outlet for his rage, his sadness and guilt still remained. "Mom," he whispered. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." As he was crying he heard a sniffling behind him. Izuku turned his head to see Eri with tears in her eyes as well. "Oh right. I almost forgot the little girl. I have to be strong. At least for a little longer." Izuku took a deep breath and wiped his tears. Hello," he said nervously. The girl didn't say anything, instead choosing to just quiver in fear. "I'm not going to hurt you," Izuku said gently. "I came to save you." The girl looked at him confused. "Why? I'm a monster. I don't deserve to be saved." Izuku remembered what Chrono said before he killed him. Those BSTRDS. They tortured a little girl and called her the monster. Putting aside his anger, Izuku approached the little girl. "You are not a monster," he told her. Eri's eyes widened as these were the first kind words she had ever received. But they said Izuku cut her off. "Those were bad people. They hurt and stole from and killed innocent people. Nothing they said about you was true." More tears spilled out as I couldn't understand why he was being so nice to her. "But no buts," Izuku said, cutting her off again. "Do you know how I found you?" Eri shook her head. "No. I have an ability that lets me know when the blood of the innocent is spilled and where to find the person who did it," Izuku explained. Eri's eyes widened as she realized what this implied. Izuku smiled at her gently. "If you were a monster, then I wouldn't have been able to find you." "You are not a monster," Eri cried. She was so confused but at the same time slightly happy, which due to how rare happiness was for her confused her even more. Her horn started to extend and her body started glowing green. Izuku instinctively wrapped his arm around the girl to comfort her. Eri realized what was happening. If he touched her he was going to disappear. "Wait!" she cried, but Izuku's arms had already made contact. And then Izuku transformed into his demonic form. Eri panicked partly because she was touching him and thought he was going to disappear and partly because his fire was touching her. But she quickly realized something was off. He wasn't disappearing and his fire which had just burnt Chrono to ash instead felt warm and comforting. Izuku realized he transformed and had also freaked out a little but he saw that his flames were not hurting her. I guess they only burn what I want them to. That must be why my clothes didn't catch fire. Seeing this Izuku went all in and hugged her with everything he had as Eri for the first time felt a gentle touch. She cried. She wrapped her arms around his waist and cried into his chest. All her fears and pains she let loose in Izuku's comforting embrace as the two glowed green. After about half an hour Eri started to calm down and the green glow faded. This caused Izuku to return to his human form. My curse. Eri sniffed. It didn't work. You're still here. Curse. Izuku asked. My quirk, Eri answered. Overhaul said it was a curse. A disease. Izuku clenched his teeth. Well, he is a lair. No quirk is a curse. Tell me, I never actually asked for your name. It's Eri, right? Eri nodded. Well, my name is Izuku Midoriya. Eri. What is your quirk? Eri looked at him fearfully. It's. Overhaul said it rewinds people. I made Papa disappear. Eri started to cry again as Izuku was in shock. Rewinds people. What does that mean? Does it make them younger? She said she made her father disappear, so I guess so. That is a dangerous quirk. But still, no one let alone a little girl deserves this. Izuku shook his head and tightened his embrace. Eri. Did you do it on purpose? Izuku asked her. Eri looked up at him, fear still present in her eyes. And no. Then it's not your fault, Izuku said, patting her on the head. What? Eri looked at him confused. Why didn't he hate her? She still couldn't understand. All children your age have problems controlling their quirks. It's not your fault, Eri. Eri looked at him like he had 10 heads and asked. Why? This time it was Izuku's turn to be confused. Why what? Why are you being so nice to me? Eri cried. Izuku looked at her confused before putting on a kind smile. Because you deserve it. Eri didn't know how to respond. No one had ever been nice to her. At least no, honestly. This person. He was so nice. Eri clung onto him, not letting go for dear life, in fear that this was all a dream and Overhaul was still alive and the boy would disappear. Izuku smiled at this adorable sight before realizing he should probably bring her home. Eri. I know you said your father was gone, but is your mother still around? He asked. Eri flinched. Mama didn't want me anymore. If Eri had any tears left, she would most likely still be crying. Which reminded Izuku he should probably get her something to drink. Alright then. Eri. I'm going to bring you to the police station where no. Eri hugged him tighter and Izuku grunted in pain as Eri's horn was hurting his already bruised ribs. The police are bad. I saw Overhaul taking to them and he gives them a bunch of money. Izuku sighed. Great. Corrupt police. I'll have to deal with that later. Well, then I'll bring you to the heroes then. Eri hugged harder. They're being paid off too, aren't they? Eri nodded. Izuku groaned. Well, at least that explains why no one showed up when I was fighting Overhaul. Izuku wondered what to do next when Eri asked. Can I stay with you? Please. She looked so unsure about asking that, but her eyes were so full of hope. Izuku sighed. He knew saying yes was a bad idea. He had no home. No money. He was dealing with his own issues and was probably really mentally unstable. He also knew that there was no way he would be able to say no. Of course, Izuku said. Eri's eyes widened. Ah, really? Izuku smiled. Yes. Eri sunk her head into his chest and muttered 1,000 thank yous. Izuku's heart melted at this and he picked the girl up and held her in his arms. Let's see if I can find you something to eat. Turns out there was indeed food in the bunker lab. The whole place was the size of a small house and was located underground. It contained a small bedroom with one bed and a tea, well as a kitchen of sorts that only had a refrigerator, a stove, a few pantries, and a sink. As well as one bathroom and a lab. The refrigerator and the pantries were stocked with all kinds of food and water. Most likely this place was meant so the Yakuza could perform tests undisturbed, but seeing as they were all dead now, Izuku figured this place would be his new house of sorts. Given how out of the way it was, it seemed like a perfect place for a murderous vigilante to live. He made him and Eri like 5 sandwiches each because they were both really hungry, and that was all Izuku had the energy to make. Izuku also found some medical supplies and used them to patch himself up as Eri watched. Izuku took Eri and put her down in the bed. Alright, I know you're tired, so just go to sleep. I'll be in the other room. You promise you'll be here when I wake up? She asked. Izuku gave her a smile. I promise. With that, Izuku turned off the lights and walked into the kitchen. He sat down. Now he could grieve. Izuku let the tears roll down his eyes as he picked up where he left off. Why are you crying? Izuku turned his head and Eri was standing there. Eri. What are you doing up? He asked. Eri looked down. I couldn't sleep. I was scared. Then I heard you crying. I'm sorry. No Eri, it's okay. I did something bad, Eri. Izuku confessed, too emotionally spent to continue being strong. Bad? Eri asked. What could he have possibly done that was bad? To Eri, he was the nicest person on earth. I killed my mom. I did something I wasn't supposed to, and she died. I'm a monster. Tears were now pouring down faster than he could wipe them away. Eri looked at him for a moment before asking. Did you do it on purpose? What? No. Izuku said, panicked. Then it's not your fault, Eri said, simply going up and hugging the crying boy. Izuku was confused for a second before releasing what just happened. You're like me, Eri said, looking up at him. So if you're a monster, then I'm a monster. Am I a monster? Eri looked at him, fearfully worried he would say yes. No. Of course not. Izuku said instantly. Then you're not a monster, Eri said. Checkmate. Izuku couldn't believe he had just been out logic-ed by a girl who couldn't be any older than 7. Izuku did truly believe that Eri wasn't at fault for her father's death. But at the same time, he did believe he was responsible for his mother's death. Sure, there were differences in what happened and how, but in the end the result was that neither of them wanted to kill their parent but did by accident. Izuku was at a loss for thought. And so he laughed. He laughed at the fact little girl made him feel like such an idiot. And his tears of sadness turned into tears of laughter. Eri looked at him confused as to what was so funny. Izuku's laughter stopped and he looked down at Eri and smiled. Eri could tell this smile was much more real than the ones before. The pain in his eyes was still there, but it seemed like there was less of it than before. And for the first time, Eri felt proud. Izuku picked her up once more. Thank you, Eri. I feel much better now. Eri nodded and Izuku walked back to the bedroom and put her in bed once more. Izuku turned to leave, but Eri grabbed his shirt before he could. See, could I sleep with you? Please. She asked fearfully. Izuku looked at her for a moment before nodding. Eri moved over and Izuku crawled into the bed. Immediately Eri nestled herself into his chest, holding on to him tight. Izuku noticed she still looked slightly afraid before realizing the problem. She's afraid of the dark. Without another thought, Izuku ignited himself. He didn't fully transform, he just made some small flames across his body, turning him into a human candle. Eri's fears eased as the girl slowly drifted off. And for the first time, a smile formed on her face. Izuku's heart melted once more and he felt something for the first time. Pride. He saved this girl. He is the reason she's smiling. A single tear went down his face as he pulled her close. Thank you, Eri. And so he drifted off to sleep. Izuka and All Might in his skinny form were walking to Izuka's house. All Might was carrying the exhausted girl on his back. Good thing she was light. All Might, Izuka said tiredly. You didn't have to carry me. You're right. I didn't have to carry you. Is what I would say if you didn't overexert yourself and collapse again. All Might replied, annoyed. Sorry. Izuka groaned. All Might sighed. I can't be too HRD on her. After all, I acted the same way when I was her age. All Might. I really am sorry, but I have to be better. Izuka said, looked away from the number one hero. Young Midoriya, you are already strong. All Might reassured. With your telekinesis alone you are a force to be reckoned with. And when you receive one for all, I have no doubt you'll be the top of your class. But I need to be more than that. Izuku said without missing a beat. I need to be the best. For Izuku. Guilt. It was an emotion that All Might was familiar with, but never more so than now. You need to tell her what you said. All Might thought fearfully. His train of thought was derailed as a certain smell came to his nose. Smoke. All Might looked up and with his surprisingly good eyesight saw in the distance, a fire. Coming from Izuka's house. All Might. Izuka said, wondering what was going on. Without another word, Almighty buffed up and rocketed away, stopping just in front of the girl home. Izuka saw her house covered in flames and looked on in horror. MOM. Izuka cried. All Might set Izuka down away from the fire and ran into the burning residence. Izuka tried to get up, but her limbs refused to listen, and instead all she could do was watch and cry. All Might searched through the house looking for the girl's mother when he saw a large hole in the wall. Walking through it, he found the unmoving body of Izuku Midoriya. No. Please. She's been through enough. All Might crouched down and looked for any sign that the woman was still alive. He found none. He held his head down. And mourned the women he never met. Izuka. I have failed you again. All Might picked up the woman's body and carried her away. Izuka, who could barely see through her tears, saw All Might's figure coming towards her. It was blurry, but it looked like he was holding someone. Mom. Izuka smiled as relief filled her. But as All Might came closer, she saw something that destroyed that relief. She wasn't moving. Out of desperation, Izuka used her quirk to force herself to her feet and ran towards the hero, ignoring the pain throughout her entire body. All Might. Izuka yelled, facing him. Isis, she. All Might looked at her, tears dropping from his eyes. I'm sorry. Izuka dropped to her knees, immeasurable sadness and rage running through her. Once again, all she could do in the face of loss was scream. Ra. Hours later. The police had arrived on the scene and the firemen showed up to put out the flames. Izuka was brought to the Bakugo's house as they were her godparents. All Might went to the police station where he asked his friend, Detective Naomasa Tsukachi, what had happened. Well, from what we can tell, the fire was started during a cooking incident. Something went wrong with her stove. The detective explained. It seemed like someone tried to save her by taking her outside and putting out the flames, but unfortunately they were too late. How do you know that? All Might asked. The burns on her body would have been far more severe unless someone put them out. Not to mention Mrs. Midoriya had no means of breaking down a wall. Naomasa said. Do you know where her father is? All Might asked, wanting to know where the man was. Dead. He died when his children were 6. Naomasa said with a heavy sigh. That poor girl. It's like the universe has it out for her. All Might nodded. Guilt eating away at him. I can't imagine things will get much better though. Naomasa elaborated. Her godparents are the Bakugos and form the file. I read it seemed like her and the boy have a bad history. Aerially bad history. Bakugo. All Might remembered that name. Izuka talked about him a few times, and from what he heard he sounded like someone he did not want Izuka to be around right now. She's suffered enough. What if I took her in? All Might asked. Naomasa's eyes widened. Wait, are you serious? Tosh, if the media ever found out about this, there would be a connection between you and the girl, and one for all could. In disbelief. You revealed your secret. For me. All Might gave her a sad smile. Of course. I would show the whole world this form if it meant making you happy. Izuka said nothing as she just looked at All Might in shock. Then tears once again rolled down her cheeks as she ran up and hugged the skinny man. Thank you. All Might returned the hug as the two embraced. After a few seconds, Mitsuki coughed, getting All Might's attention. She gave him a look telling him what he had to do. All Might breathed in deeply, tightening the hug. Young Midoriya. No. Izuka. I have kept something from you. Something I should have told you a while ago, but I didn't have the strength to say it. Izuka took her head off of his chest and looked at him. What? Your brother. I met him. Izuka looked at him confused. You met Izuku? When? He definitely would have said something about Dash, it was the day he died. Izuka's eyes widened and she broke up the hug. What happened? Her voice was deadly serious. All Might looked at her, his eyes full of remorse. He asked me if he could be a hero. Even if he was quirkless. Oh. Izuka didn't need to hear the rest. The room was quiet as Izuka digested this information. To understand, if you don't want to come with me. I just want you to know. All Might's tears returned as he faced the last living family member of a boy, who in his mind, he had killed. I am so sorry. Izuka didn't say anything for a moment before she turned to Mitsuki. Aunt Mitsuki. Could we have some privacy? The girl asked. Mitsuki nodded and went upstairs. After that came another few minutes of silence. Did you mean to? Izuka said suddenly. What? All Might asked. Did you mean to kill him? Izuka reiterated. What? No. Of course not. I had meant to discourage him from putting himself in danger. Came All Might's panicked response. Then it's not your fault. She said without hesitation. All Might stared at her with silent shock. She should hate me. Why? How can she be so forgiving? Izuka sat down on the sofa and glared at the ceiling where unknown to All Might Katsuki's room was located. There are a lot of people who are responsible for my brother's death. So many I can't even remember them all. But you are not one of them. All Might had nothing to say to that. Izuka patted the spot next to her on the sofa. Signaling him to sit, which he gladly complied with, tired from the emotional weight he had been holding on his chest for weeks. Izuka rested her head on his shoulder and for a few minutes, the two of them sat in comfortable silence. Hey. All Might. Yes. Can we go home now? Of course. Bakugo wished he was someone else. This was strange, since if you looked at the boy 2 months ago, he wouldn't want to be anyone but him. But when Deku died, the way Bakugo looked back on his life in a different light. The times he put Deku in his place now seemed like nothing more than senseless beatings on someone who couldn't even defend himself. The times he made fun of Deku, saying that he could never be a hero, now seemed cruel. As Bakugo looked back, he started to see just how much damage he did to Izuku both physically and mentally. Bakugo used to have a rather simple thought process. Heroes win. Villains lose. But who won here? Izuku didn't. He was dead, and Bakugo certainly didn't feel like a winner. No one. No one won anything. This was all pointless. And the worst part was Deku. No, Izuku didn't even do anything wrong. For so long he had thought that Deku was looking down on him. Thinking that a quirkless loser could compete with him. He thought that all the praises, all the looks of admiration were all fake. That Deku was making fun of him. But if that was the case, why would he kill himself? Bakugo was forced to face the reality that everything he knew was wrong. And now all those compliments sank into him like hot knives, as he now knew they were all genuine and that he beat the SHT out of someone who was once his friend for literally no reason. Bakugo walked to school that day, and as usual, all eyes were on him. Except this time things were different. They looked at him as if he just killed someone. Because you did. They looked at him like he was the sum of the earth. Because you are. They looked at him like they could be next. They might be. Bakugo sat down at his desk while the other students around him whispered. I didn't think he would actually do it. I always knew Bakugo was a villain. Someone like that can never be a hero. They all whispered and acted like they didn't all laugh and make fun of Izuku themselves. But they never went as far as you. The teacher walked in. But it wasn't the same teacher as before. Ah, Bakugo. Welcome back. The teacher said. You have absent for a little over a month. Understandable considering how close your family was to the Midoriyas. Well, you should now that you old teacher was deemed unfit to teach after the incident, so I'm here to fill in until they can find a proper replacement. That makes sense. Alright, class, I have an announcement. The teacher said. As you all know, Izuka Midoriya's brother has passed. However, something just as unfortunate happened, and yesterday her mother was unfortunately killed in a fire. She will be moving to live with a friend and as such will no longer be attending this school. The eyes of all the students went wide as they began to whisper once more. What the hell? What kind of bad luck do you have for that to happen? Luck but Bakugo probably did it. Yeah, that but has always had it out for the Midoriyas. She died in a fire. His quirk can start fires. Coincidence. They think I killed Auntie. I wouldn't. You didn't think you would kill Izuku either, but look what happened. After lunch, there was an anti-bullying seminar. Apparently, there had been a lot of these after Izuku died. The school must be trying to save face. And they had one just on the day you came back. How subtle. After school, Bakugo walked home. He walked slowly into his room and crawled into his bed. He stayed there for hours. Reflecting on his deed. On his life, until his mother walked in. She looked at him and sighed. It had been getting worse. At first, he was just shocked. He still went about his day as normal, but everything he did was half-hearted. Then he started zoning out, staring at nothing while lost in thought. He started calling her mom instead of old hag. He did what he was told without uttering a single curse. Then he just shut down. Going into his room and only coming out to eat. This had to stop. She walked over and sat on the bed next to her son. I'm not gonna say that you're blameless. Because you aren't. You didn't listen to me when I told you to stop. And now look what happened. Katsuki didn't move. But Mitsuki continued. You're not completely at fault either. There were a lot of reasons Izuku did what he did. There may even be more than I know of. But still, it's not like you told him to jump. For the first time since he was 6. Bakugo Katsuki flinched. Mitsuki felt her heart skip a beat. Katsuki. You didn't tell him to jump, right? Bakugo turned his head to look at her. His eyes haunted by his own mistake. I didn't think he would. The room was silent. Inko, I'm sorry. I failed as a parent. Mitsuki didn't even know how to react. She didn't think her own son could ever do something so horrible. So she just stood there staring at him in shock. I thought he was looking down on me all this time. It set me off. I thought that he was trying to taunt me every time he said I was awesome or amazing or some SHT. But if that's true, why? Why the F would he kill himself? Tears started making their way down Katsuki's cheeks. Mitsuki had not seen her son cry since he was 5. Why? Why did he let me do that to him? Why did he keep following me? Why did he keep saying how great of hero I was gonna be even after I kicked his butt into the dirt? Bakugo was screaming now. But he didn't care. He was letting out all the rage, sadness, confusion and regret he had felt since Izuka died. Why? Why was I such an idiot? Why did I say that? I didn't want him to F jump. So why? Why the F did I say that? Why didn't I F listen when you told me to stop? Why didn't I stop when I saw the look on Auntie Inko's face whenever he came home hurt? Why didn't I get the hint when Izuka started calling me a monster? Why? He couldn't continue. He just cried. It was then Mitsuki knew what she had to do. She would ground him. She would yell his ear off. She would beat his butt till it turned crimson. But she would do all that later. Because right now her son was hurt. And there was no way she was going to leave him like that. So that night Mitsuki Bakugo held her son in her arms and for the first time since he was 5. He let her. Later. After Bakugo had gone to sleep, Mitsuki went to her bedroom and grabbed her phone. She dialed a number and hoped the person she was calling was still awake. Auntie. What happened? Why are you calling so late? The voice was none other than Izuka, who had been staying up late training. Izuka. I just talked to Katsuki-an. I'm sorry. Mitsuki said. So he told you what he said, Izuka said, her tone getting darker. Mitsuki's eyes widened. You knew. How many people were keeping secrets from her? First All Might came down and said he told Izuku he couldn't be a hero. Then her son said he told Izuku to kill himself. And now Izuka said she knew about that the whole time. Seriously, what the F? Yeah, he said it right in front of me, Izuka said. And I threw him out a window. Why didn't you tell anyone? The school gave me after-school detention for, throwing another student out the window with my quirk. By the time I got out, Izuku was, telling someone wouldn't have done any good at that point. Still, you should have said something. I was worried you wouldn't let him go to you. What? Mitsuki was confused now. Why would she want Katsuki to get what he wants after what he did? Izuku always thought he would make a great hero. Almost every time we talked about heroes, Izuku fantasized about him and Katsuki being friends again while they took down villains. Obviously, that will never happen, but I want to at least make some part of that dream come true. So for that, Katsuki needs to become a hero. Oh. Was Mitsuki's response. She wasn't really sure if this was a bad sign or not. Anyway. Please let him go to you, Auntie. For Izuku. Sure. Mitsuki felt really uncomfortable about where this could be going. Thank you. Please make sure he gets back to training. I want him to be at his best when I permanently beat him into second place. And there was the red flag. Anyway, I have to get back to training. Bye, Auntie. Click. Mitsuki sighed as she put down the phone. Okay, now I have to find both of them a therapist. A few weeks later, Inko's funeral was much like Izuku's. It even had the same amount of people with All Might attending. Or at least that's how it looked. In actuality, there were 2 more people in the background. Izuku and Eri looked at the funeral from a few yards away behind a large tree. Izuku had his hood up so no one could recognize him, and Eri was sitting on his bike watching the whole thing unfold. "Why don't you go closer?" she asked in a whisper. Izuku had a hard time answering that question. In truth, he still felt responsible for his mother's death and felt that everyone was better off without him. But he couldn't tell her that. "Because it's better this way," he said vaguely. "How?" the girl asked, confused. "You'll understand when you're older," Izuku replied. It wasn't really a lie. She very well might understand what he was doing when she got to his age. Izuku just hoped she would forget about by then. Izuku and Eri watched as they lowered his mother's body into the grave next to his, which they had fixed after his resurrection. Izuku was extremely confused as to what All Might was doing here and why he seemed so close to Izuka. He watched as everyone said their goodbyes and the Bakugos left. Afterward, it was just Izuka and All Might. "I'm sorry I wasn't there," Izuka said, looking at the grave remorsefully. "If I had, I could have saved you." All Might put his hand on her shoulder. "Don't start blaming yourself, Izuka. There was nothing that could have been done." Guilt stabbed Izuku in the heart as he had to try hard to keep himself from crying. Eri saw this and went up and hugged his leg. Izuku smiled at this and looked back at the two with renewed strength. "You're right," Izuka said before turning back to the graves. "Don't worry, Mom. Izuku. I'll be the best #1 hero the world has ever seen. I swear. I'll make you both proud." Nope. Any emotional defense Izuku had broken apart and tears spilled from his eyes. "Izuka. I'm sorry. You'll be better off without me." "Hey, Izuku." Eri said. "Yeah, Eri," Izuku responded, trying to wipe the tears from his eyes. "Why does that lady look like you?" she asked. "Oh, she is my sister," Izuku answered. Eri looked at him puzzled. "What is a sister, DMNU Overhaul?" A sister is. Well. A sister is someone you are very close to. Most of the time they have the same parents, but not all the time. When you do have the same parents, you'll probably look similar. Izuku explained, trying to encompass every possible definition. Eri's eyes lit up. "Does that mean you're my sister?" For how excited she was, Izuku was tempted to say yes. Boys can't be sisters. The boy version of a sister is called a brother. Izuku said. "Oh. Then you're my brother?" Eri asked. Izuku smiled. "Do you want me to be?" Eri nodded. Izuku gave her a pat on the head. "Then yes. Since I'm older, that makes me your big brother and you're my little sister." Eri smiled. A rare sight that always warmed his technically dead heart. Eri felt a warmth inside her chest. Having a big brother made her really happy for some reason. But then a thought popped into her head and she frowned again. "But you already have a sister." Izuku shook his head at this. "You can have more than one brother or sister, Eri." "Oh," Eri said understandingly. If he weren't at his mom's funeral, Izuku would have laughed at her naivete. With that explanation done, Izuku turning back to his other sister and All Might. All Might was leaving and Izuka was following him. Izuku was now really confused as to what was going on with those two, but he trusted All Might. When they left, Izuku came out of hiding and removed his hood. He and Eri walked up to his mother's tombstone. Izuku kneeled down and stared at the writing. "Here lies Izuku Midoriya. Friend. Mother. Mom. I'm sorry, I can't take back what I did. If I knew the deal would cost you your life, I wouldn't have taken it. But I can't change the past. But I can help the future." Izuku signaled Eri to come and she stood next to him. "Mom, this is Eri. She was in a bad place with bad people. I saved her. I know that doesn't make up for what I did. Off. I thought that he was trying to taunt me every time he said I was awesome or amazing or some SHT. But if that's true, why? Why the F would he kill himself? Tears started making their way down Katsuki's cheeks. Mitsuki had not seen her son cry since he was 5. Why? Why did he let me do that to him? Why did he keep following me? Why did he keep saying how great of hero I was gonna be even after I kicked his butt into the dirt? Bakugo was screaming now. But he didn't care. He was letting out all the rage, sadness, confusion and regret he had felt since Izuka died. Why? Why was I such an idiot? Why did I say that? I didn't want him to jump. So why? Why the F did I say that? Why didn't I listen when you told me to stop? Why didn't I stop when I saw the look on Auntie Inko's face whenever he came home hurt? Why didn't I get the hint when Izuka started calling me a monster? Why? He couldn't continue. He just cried. It was then Mitsuki knew what she had to do. She would ground him. She would yell his ear off. She would beat his butt till it turned crimson. But she would do all that later. Because right now her son was hurt. And there was no way she was going to leave him like that. So that night Mitsuki Bakugo held her son in her arms and for the first time since he was 5. He let her. Later. After Bakugo had gone to sleep Mitsuki went to her bedroom and grabbed her phone. She dialed a number and hoped the person she was calling was still awake. Auntie. What happened? Why are you calling so late? The voice was none other than Izuka who had been staying up late training. Izuka. I just talked to Katsuki-an. I'm sorry. Mitsuki said. So he told you what he said, Izuka said, her tone getting darker. Mitsuki's eyes widened. You knew. How many people were keeping secrets from her? First All Might came down and said he told Izuku he couldn't be a hero. Then her son said he told Izuku to kill himself. And now Izuka said she knew about that the whole time. Seriously, what the F? Yeah, he said it right in front of me, Izuka said. And I threw him out a window. Why didn't you tell anyone? The school gave me after-school detention for, throwing another student out the window with my quirk. By the time I got out Izuku was, telling someone wouldn't have done any good at that point. Still you should have said something. I was worried you wouldn't let him go to you. What? Mitsuki was confused now. Why would she want Katsuki to get what he wants after what he did? Izuku always thought he would make a great hero. Almost every time we talked about heroes Izuku fantasized about him and Katsuki being friends again while they took down villains. Obviously, that will never happen, but I want to at least make some part of that dream come true. So for that Katsuki needs to become a hero. Oh. Was Mitsuki's response. She wasn't really sure if this was a bad sign or not. Anyway. Please let him go to you, Auntie. For Izuku. Sure. Mitsuki felt really uncomfortable about where this could be going. Thank you. Please make sure he gets back to training. I want him to be at his best when I permanently beat him into second place. And there was the red flag. Anyway, I have to get back to training. Bye, Auntie. Click. Mitsuki sighed as she put down the phone. Okay, now I have to find both of them a therapist. A few weeks later Inko's funeral was much like Izuku's. It even had the same amount of people with All Might attending. Or at least that's how it looked. In actuality, there were 2 more people in the background. Izuku and Eri looked at the funeral from a few yards away behind a large tree. Izuku had his hood up so no one could recognize him and Eri was sitting on his bike watching the whole thing unfold. Why don't you go closer? She asked in a whisper. Izuku had a hard time answering that question. In truth, he still felt responsible for his mother's death and felt that everyone was better off without him. But he couldn't tell her that. Because it's better this way. He said vaguely. How? The girl asked confused. You'll understand when you're older, Izuku replied. It wasn't really a lie. She very well might understand what he was doing when she got to his age. Izuku just hoped she would forget about by then. Izuku and Eri watched as they lowered his mother's body into the grave next to his which they had fixed after his resurrection. Izuku was extremely confused as to what All Might was doing here and why he seemed so close to Izuka. He watched as everyone said their goodbyes and the Bakugos left. Afterward, it was just Izuka and All Might. "I'm sorry I wasn't there," Izuka said looking at the grave remorsefully. "If I had I could have saved you." All Might put his hand on her shoulder. "Don't start blaming yourself, Izuka. There was nothing that could have been done." Guilt stabbed Izuku in the heart as he had to try hard to keep himself from crying. Eri saw this and went up and hugged his leg. Izuku smiled at this and looked back at the two with renewed strength. "You're right," Izuka said before turning back to the graves. "Don't worry, Mom. Izuku. I'll be the best #1 hero the world has ever seen. I swear. I'll make you both proud." Nope. Any emotional defense Izuku had broken apart and tears spilled from his eyes. "Izuka. I'm sorry. You'll be better off without me." "Hey, Izuku." Eri said. "Yeah, Eri," Izuku responded, trying to wipe the tears from his eyes. "Why does that lady look like you?" she asked. "Oh, she is my sister," Izuku answered. Eri looked at him puzzled. "What is a sister, DMNU Overhaul?" A sister is. Well. A sister is someone you are very close to. Most of the time they have the same parents but not all the time. When you do have the same parents you'll probably look similar. Izuku explained, trying to encompass every possible definition. Eri's eyes lit up. "Does that mean you're my sister?" For how excited she was, Izuku was tempted to say yes. Boys can't be sisters. The boy version of a sister is called a brother. Izuku said. "Oh. Then you're my brother?" Eri asked. Izuku smiled. "Do you want me to be?" Eri nodded. Izuku gave her a pat on the head. "Then yes. Since I'm older that makes me your big brother and you're my little sister." Eri smiled. A rare sight that always warmed his technically dead heart. Eri felt a warmth inside her chest. Having a big brother made her really happy for some reason. But then a thought popped into her head and she frowned again. "But you already have a sister." Izuku shook his head at this. "You can have more than one brother or sister, Eri." "Oh," Eri said understandingly. If he weren't at his mom's funeral, Izuku would have laughed at her naivete. With that explanation done, Izuku turning back to his other sister and All Might. All Might was leaving and Izuka was following him. Izuku was now really confused as to what was going on with those two, but he trusted All Might. When they left, Izuku came out of hiding and removed his hood. He and Eri walked up to his mother's tombstone. Izuku kneeled down and stared at the writing. "Here lies Izuku Midoriya. Friend. Mother. Mom. I'm sorry I can't take back what I did. If I knew the deal would cost you your life I wouldn't have taken it. But I can't change the past. But I can help the future." Izuku signaled Eri to come and she stood next to him. "Mom, this is Eri. She was in a bad place with bad people. I saved her. I know that doesn't make up for what I did. But I hope that one day if I save enough people one day you'll forgive me." The tears returned with force and poured from Izuku's eyes once more. "And maybe one day I'll forgive myself." Eri hugged him once more. Izuku smiled, tears still pouring. He picked up Eri and rose back up. "Goodbye, Mom." As Izuku walked away, Eri waved at the grave. "By Izuku's mama." Izuku ruffled her hair. "You are too good for this world, Eri." Eri didn't know what that meant, but she liked it when Izuku did stuff like ruffle her hair or hug her. Whenever one of the Yakuza members touched her it was forceful and always hurt a little. And whenever Overhaul touched her it hurt a lot. When Izuku touched her it was always so gentle and caring, and when he was in his skeleton form he was always so warm. For the first time, Eri found herself smiling twice in one day. She was so glad Izuku murdered all the Yakuza. They walked back to Izuku's bike. Set Eri down on the seat and then sat down in front of her. Eri wrapped her arms around him and Izuku picked up the motorcycle helmet on the ground next to them and placed it on Eri's head. The helmet was pink with butterflies on it and was far too big for Eri. Izuku bought it with money he took from some drag dealers he killed. Izuku put his hood back up after making sure Eri wasn't going to fall. The two rocketed away back home. Home. The former Yakuza hideout had been transformed into a comfy living space for Izuku and Eri. Eri insisted on sharing the same room and bed, so the bedroom mostly consisted of hero merch that he and Eri liked. The kitchen now had a small table with a basket of apples in the center. When Izuku first gave Eri an apple she said it was the best thing she had ever tasted. In response, Izuku always made sure there were apples in the basket and apple juice in the fridge. Because Izuku was always willing to spoil her and he had killed enough villains to have a large amount of money. Izuku had also got Eri multiple gaming consoles including a computer to keep her occupied whenever he was out killing villains. After teaching her how to use them he showed her a bunch of educational games that Eri immediately gravitated towards. Every time Izuku came from a busy day of manslaughter Eri would always run up to him and tell him all the new things she learned, and Izuku would always listen with a smile on his face as he cleaned the blood off his clothes. Izuku had also bought a new TV and sofa which was a nightmare to carry on a motorcycle and put into an underground hideout without anyone noticing, but somehow he managed. Before bed Izuku and Eri sat down and watched hero fights on the news, and Izuku would analyze their quirks causing him to go into a muttering storm. And Eri would watch and jump in with her own analysis which while inaccurate and far-fetched were always cute. The lab had been turned into Izuku's workroom. Izuku kept his weapons and motorcycle there as well as all the medical supplies. He destroyed most of the formulas and beakers and burned all the papers after reading them. Izuku was slightly disturbed by how Eri had no problems walking into the room whenever he came in there, considering the room always smells like blood. Eri had become much happier and more energetic since Izuku found her. She still wasn't used to smiling, but she was learning. Izuku made it his goal to make her smile at least once a day. Although he had yet to make her laugh. He had gotten her a bunch of new clothes to replace the dirty dress he found her in. Most of them were hero-themed. After looking through Chrono's papers Izuku found that Eri's quirk wasn't just an age regression quirk, it was a biological rewind quirk, or just rewind for short. It could turn someone into a baby, or a monkey, or nothing. She could also destroy someone's quirk by rewinding their body to the point before humans had evolved and gained quirks. Ever since then Izuku had been trying to teach her how to control her quirk, an act Eri was very grateful for. Izuku, on the other hand, hadn't really changed all too much. Thanks to being the spirit of vengeance, Izuku didn't really have a problem with killing criminals. He treated it basically like community service, which to him it was, even if he did take some money from his victims. Overall they were doing well for a boy who died, lost his mother and now has to kill criminals, and a little girl who's been through hell. The two were sitting down watching the news when suddenly the picture on the screen changed from a group of heroes to Izuku in his skeleton form. Izuku went to get the remote to change the channel. He didn't like the idea or Eri watching the news talk about his job, so whenever he came on Izuku changed the channel, much to Eri's annoyance. Except this time the remote was gone. And Eri was smiling. "Eri, where did you put the remote?" Izuku asked. Eri said nothing and kept watching the screen, smiling at finally getting to see her new brother on the news. Thinking that people would praise him like they did the heroes. There were 4 more murders tonight. Or at least 4 that we know of. The newswomen said. All signs point to the villain that had been terrorizing the city. Eri's simile faded and turned into a confused frown. Terrorizing. Villain. This skull-headed pyromaniac was been given many names on social media. The most popular one being Hell Flame. However, those people were swiftly sued by Endeavor for using the name of his quirk. So the police have decided to call him by his second most popular name, Ghost Rider," said the newsman. Ghost Rider. Izuku thought. That sounds like something from ever since his first appearance destroying the Yakuza organization. He has been murdering criminals left and right. Heroes have attempted to stop them, but with his flaming motorcycle he has proved too fast for all who have tried. The newsman continued. Eri was starting to get really confused. Why are people trying to stop him? However, number 3 hero Hawks released a statement on this matter. A rare occasion which we will show you now. The image changed to show Hawks with a microphone looking as nonchalant as ever. Yeah, Ghost Rider. I'll take care of it. And then he flew away. And the screen changed back to the news people. While the statement was brief, it gives us hope that this maniac will finally be put behind bars. The newswomen said. But he doesn't need to be behind bars. Eri yelled at the TV, Izuku's side, and left to start looking for the remote elsewhere. I know I have hope, echoed the newsman. I can't wait till this is all behind us and this man faces the consequences for his actions. He didn't do anything wrong. He's helping. Eri screamed, tears shining in her eyes. Now we have a special guest tonight whom we mentioned earlier. Ladies and gentlemen, it's number 2 hero Endeavor. The screen shifted to Endeavor sitting on a couch with another news lady. Hi, I'm Yusu Teori here with Endeavor, she said, introducing herself. First, I would like to thank you for accepting this interview. You're welcome, Endeavor said, looking like he didn't want to be here. I would like to ask you if you plan on helping Hawks take down the Ghost Rider. Teori asked. Endeavor glared at her. I don't need that layabout's help. I will deal with this villain like all the others. He's not a villain. Eri started pounding on the TV screen. Well, with both the number 2 and number 3 hero on the job, I'm sure boop. Eri looked around to find Izuku had found the remote. The bowl of apples. Really, Eri? I am ashamed I didn't find it sooner, Izuku said. Eri ran to him and Izuku knelt down to let her hug him. Why? Why are they saying such mean things? Eri cried into his torso. Izuku sighed. He knew this would happen eventually. He just hoped that it would have happened later. Eri. I'm not a hero. To be a hero you have to go to hero school and obtain a hero license. If you try to fight crime without a hero license, then you are considered a vigilante, which is illegal. I would be a vigilante, but because I kill people I am considered a villain, Izuku explained. But you save people, Eri argued. And you only kill bad people. Izuku shook his head. It doesn't matter, Eri. You could save 1,000 people and only kill one person and you would still be a villain. That's how the world works. That's not fair. You're not a villain. Overhaul was a villain and you're not like him, Eri screamed. Eri. Regardless of everything else, I kill people. Yes, they do deserve it, but not everyone sees it like that. You're not supposed to kill people. Even heroes are told to avoid killing if they don't have to. Why? If they hurt people they should die. Why is that a problem? Izuku stared at her speechless. Did she just say that? It was then Izuku realized something. The only people Eri had ever known were killers. And him. The only person to ever be nice to her was a serial killer. No wonder killing was so normal to her. No wonder she was able to walk into rooms that smelled like BLD and not even flinch. She was used to it. And even if she showed a problem with killing innocent people, that didn't mean she felt bad for not so innocent people dying. Izuku pushed Eri back a bit and put his hands on her shoulders. Eri. Killing is not normal. I do it because I have to. It's my job as the spirit of vengeance. But people shouldn't just kill because they feel like it. I know you may not understand this right now. But you will. I promise. Eri sniffed, her head tilted in confusion. But it's not fair. You saved people. You saved me. You should be a hero. A tear of joy ran down Izuku's cheek and a smile found a way onto his face. That was the first time anyone ever told him that. Thank you, Eri. Izuku looked at the clock. It read 11:30. He stood up and looked back at Eri. Hey. Let's go to bed. Eri nodded and raised her arms, telling Izuku she wanted to be picked up. Izuku did just that as he carried her to bed. He opened the bedroom door before closing it again. He turned off the lights and walked over to the bed. He placed her in the bed before crawling in there himself. Eri placed her arms around his waist and Izuku turned on his green flames. And in no time Eri was asleep. Izuku looked at her. She was holding on to him tighter than usual. I really need to get her to meet some new people. Of course, this was easier said than done. Because while Eri has happier and more energetic around him, he had a feeling that she would not be the same way around other people. Not to mention the problem that was finding a person he could trust around Eri in the first place. He would get her a therapist, but that would be even more difficult considering he was legally dead and Eri didn't legally exist. Izuku closed his eyes. Maybe I should get her a cat. Meanwhile elsewhere. A man watched the news feed and smiled. With how the media portrays him, perhaps I can turn this incarnation of the spirit of vengeance into an ally. After all these years you still don't know how the spirit of vengeance works. Well, I am only human, Blackheart. A demonic laugh echoed. Oh please. We both know you gave up your humanity long ago. All for one. The two old friends laughed at this before All for One brought up the elephant in the room. So then. How are we gonna kill this one? A mouth before the UA entrance exam. Izuka laid there on Dagobah Beach. Utterly exhausted. The last test before she could receive All for One was to clean up Dagobah Beach, that had been covered in trash, without her quirk. All Might didn't really think this through, as Izuka would stay at the beach for as long as she could and would sneak out at night to continue her task. You see, Izuka was almost a perfect student. She didn't complain, she did what she was told and she was passionately devoted to her training. The only problem was she was a bit too devoted to training. When she wasn't busy studying, she was training, and this caused a few problems. She would often collapse and would have to take a couple of days off to recover. She had started doing this less and less, but it was still an issue. Well. That was quick. All Might said, looking around the now clear beach. Well, the time has come. Izuka quickly pulled herself off the ground and stood at attention. All Might chuckled. He reached for the top of his head and plucked out a hair before holding out to Izuka. Eat this. Izuka stared at the hair, confused. What? All Might rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. In order to inherit my power you have to take in my DNA. Izuka deadpanned. That's kind of underwhelming. I was expecting more lights and flashiness. Well, reality is often disappointing. All Might responded. Izuka sighed and took the hair. She looked at it hard before she slowly put it in her mouth and swallowed. Ugh. Why was it sour? Izuka asked, disgusted. All Might shrugged his shoulders. Getting over the taste of sour hair. Izuka looks at herself. I don't feel any different. It will take a couple of hours to go through your digestive system. All Might explained. Oh. Well, in the meantime I could train my quirk - rest. All Might yelled, not having any of her nonsense. Izuka sighed. Fine. The day before the UA entrance exam, Bakugo had to make up for lost time. After confessing to his mother, Bakugo felt better. He wasn't back to his old self. It's almost impossible to think he could go back to his old self. But he was at least able to function. Right now he was practicing his aerial mobility. However, something was off. He was slowly flying away from his house. At first, Bakugo just thought that his trajectory was off. But when Bakugo was out of sight, his body flew far away from everyone else. The invisible force pushed Bakugo into the woods, where it promptly slammed him into the ground. Bakugo groaned and rose up to see Izuka with a face so smug it could rival Bakugo in his prime. "Hey, Kaken," she said, putting extra emphasis on the nickname while speaking in a sickly sweet voice. Bakugo shivered both at hearing that nickname and from the way she said it. Something is wrong. He quirk was never this strong. Bakugo got up but was quickly pushed back down by Izuka's quirk. "You know, I think I've been acting a bit unprofessional," Izuka said. "If we are both going to be heroes, then we might have to work together. And the way things are now, I don't think that would go well." Bakugo did not like where this was going. "So, I thought of a way to ease the tension between us." Izuka lied. "Let's spar." Kaken. Bakugo tried to say something, but he felt Izuka's quirk keeping his mouth shut. Izuka started the battle by raising Bakugo into the air and hurling him through several trees. Bakugo got up. His back hurt like hell. "Wait." Izuka did no such thing and picked up the trees that she had thrown Bakugo into and threw them at Bakugo. Bakugo used his quirk to maneuver himself out of the way of the attack. Bakugo tried to escape, but Izuka used her quirk to try and pull him back in. Bakugo increased the power of his explosions, trying desperately to escape. Izuka saw this and smirked and released Bakugo from the effect of her quirk, causing Bakugo to rocket full force into a tree. When the dust cleared, it showed Bakugo laying there, his head bleeding from the impact. Bakugo tried to get up, but Izuka picked up the fallen tree beside him and dropped it on top of him. "Gah!" Bakugo screamed in pain. Using her quirk, Izuka floated over to him. And she was said, "Pathetic. This battle is done. I can't injure you too much before the entrance exam." Bakugo stopped trying to escape and hoped Izuka was telling the truth about the battle being over. Izuka saw this and was even more infuriated. "Now you don't want to fight. Where the hell was this pacifism when my brother was alive?" Izuka used her quirk and lifted the tree off of him and lifted him into the air. "What happened to you?" she shouted. Bakugo felt a force pressing against his neck, choking him. "For so long I tried to get you to stop, and now when I actually want you to fight. Now you choose to not fight. F you. It's like you only exist to make my life harder." Bakugo started to see black spots fading in and out in the corner of his vision. He had no choice. Bakugo faced his palm towards Izuka. Boom! A large explosion unleashed from Bakugo's palm, releasing him from Izuka's quirk and sending both of them flying. Bakugo grunted in pain. He forced himself to his knees and looked towards the cloud of smoke Izuka had been sent flying into. Bakugo got up and readied himself for more of Izuka's attacks. When the smoke cleared, Bakugo didn't see Izuka. He saw Izuku. A 12-year-old Izuku. The young Izuku had bruises and burns all over his face. Marks that were familiar to Bakugo. "Deku?" Bakugo asked, confused and scared. The young boy looked up at Bakugo with tears in his eyes. "Kaken." "Why?" Bakugo walked towards him, but little Izuku looked at him in fear and back away. "Wait!" Bakugo yelled. "Don't go. Please. I'm sorry I didn't dash," and then he was picked up and slammed into the ground. Bakugo ignored the pain and quickly got back up to get Izuku. Only to find he was gone. Like he was never there in the first place. What the F was that? Instead of Izuku, there was Izuka standing in the exact same spot Izuku had stood in before. "You just started freaking the F out," she screamed. "What the hell is wrong with him? He thought I was Izuku. Has lost his mind." Then a thought came to her mind. Izuka lifted Bakugo off his feet and brought him in front of her. She forced his hand to rise up. His palm in front of her face. This sight was too familiar to Bakugo. Suddenly everything changed. Instead of the set of Izuka, there stood the scared Izuku. Kaken. Please stop. Bakugo started breathing heavily and tried to back away, forgetting that he was levitating. Suddenly something slaps him in the face and Izuku was gone. You lost your mind, Izuka said with a look of disbelief on her face. That disbelief turned to rage as threw Bakugo back into the ground. And this time he stayed down. Useless. You're just an empty husk. A shell of your former self. Izuka raged. You can't even hit me without going nuts. Izuka stormed away screaming curses all along the way. Bakugo waited until he could no longer hear her. Then slowly he got up and walked home limping. What the F was that? I could use my quirk just fine. But when Izuka was there. Bakugo reached home and his mother freaked out. What the F happened? She asked/demanded. Bakugo said nothing for a few seconds before responding. I had a training accident. The next day. Izuka walked up to the gates of absolutely said. That goddamn monster. What right does he have to grow a goddamn conscience now? Izuka wasn't blind or stupid. She knew that Bakugo didn't actually want her brother to die despite what he had done and said. She also knew that he had been affected by her brother's death. But she thought he would get over it. She thought that once the shock went away he would go back to being the same heartless monster he always was. But no. Apparently, he wasn't going back to normal, which drove Izuka insane, as beating the SHT out of him was now nowhere near as satisfying. Izuka was so distracted that she didn't even notice the small rock in her way causing her to trip. Before she hit the ground she tried using her quirk to stop her fall and she felt someone touch her. Suddenly she was rocketed into the sky. Ha! Izuka flew through the air not knowing what was going on. She deactivated her quirk and suddenly she fell like a rock. As she got closer to the ground she activated her quirk and she felt someone touch her again and once more she flew. This continued for quite some time until the staff managed to stop it and had brought her and a brown-haired girl to speak with the staff. Apparently, the brown-haired girl, Ochiko Uraraka, had a zero-gravity quirk and had been attempting to stop her fall at the same time Izuka activated her telekinesis. The sudden loss of weight made it so when Izuka used her quirk, the force that would normally just be enough to hold her weight sent her flying. Seeing as it was all just an accident, the staff sent the two off with a warning. As soon as the staff left, Ochiko turned towards Izuka and bowed. I am so sorry. Izuka shook her head. No. There's no need to apologize. You were just trying to help. If anything, I should be thanking you. But I didn't actually help, Ochiko said sheepishly. Yeah. But it's the thought that counts. Izuka responded. Ochiko smiled. I guess. Oh. I have to go. Maybe we can hang out later. Izuka was taken aback. She had never really had friends. Most people avoided her due to how many people she sent to the nurse's office because they made fun of her brother. So to have someone ask her if she wanted to hang out was strange. Sure. Izuka responded. They exchanged phone numbers and went their separate ways. Something about her reminded me of something. Flashback. A 10-year-old Izuku was crying after getting beat up defending someone else. After beating him up, the bullies then proceeded to beat up the other kid until Izuka showed up and kicked their ass. Izuka. I'm sorry. He cried. Izuka patted her brother on the back. It's okay. It's not your fault. Izuku shook his head rapidly. But I didn't even help. Izuka gave him a hug. Yeah. But it's the thought that counts. Izuku sniffed. Really? Izuka smiled. Really? Back to the present. Izuka shed a tear and gave a sad smile of a bittersweet memory. I really hope me and Achiko can be good friends. Later Izuka pumped herself up. Now was the time for her to get first place. She looked towards the door when she saw something out of the corner of her eye. Achiko. Izuka was about to say something to her when suddenly she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned her head to see a tall boy with blue hair staring at her with disapproval in his eyes. She is clearly trying to concentrate. Are you trying to distract her? If so, then leave immediately. Has no room for such deplorable people. He said. All the other kids in the room looked at her and laughed, writing her off as no competition. And that made her blood boil. She quickly sent a wave of telekinetic force to all the empty spaces in the room, causing those spaces to crack open, and she sent out wave right beneath her, causing the ground to crack. You assholes have something you want to say to my face? She yelled at the participants. No one said anything due to a combination of shock and fear. Izuka turned to the blue boy and gave him a deadly glare. And you? What kind of but goes around assuming what people are doing and judging them based off that? Get off your high horse face, I was trying to tell her good luck. Before he could respond, the doors opened. What are you waiting for? Came the voice of present Mike. In real life there is no countdown. Get your SS moving. Without another word, Izuka flew off into the fake city to take her anger out on some robots. She found 2 one-pointers and smashed them together. You see, Izuka's quirk was called telekinesis. She could move things with her mind. The heavier the things she's picking up, the fewer things she can pick up. She can only move things that she can see, and if she overuses her quirk she will get very painful headaches. If she keeps using it after that she will pass out. Normally she could only lift something as heavy as a car. However, after receiving one for all, her quirk became supercharged. However, this has its problems. When Izuka first used her quirk after receiving it, she passed out and didn't wake up for 3 days. However, with some time and training, Izuka learned how to control one for all to some extent. It reminded her of the time she had to learn to control her quirk. Right now she can only use 5% of her full power. However, 5% was still a massive improvement to her quirk, as she displayed by flying around and easily destroying any robot that came into view, and with her ability to fly she was able to destroy robots much quicker than anyone else. Eventually, Izuka got so many points that she just stopped counting. She already knew she won, so instead she decided to find Achiko. Achiko saw her and waved before going back, smashing robots. Izuka used her quirk to place as many robots in front of her as possible and kept them immobile but didn't destroy them. Achiko looked at her confused for a second before shrugging and destroying the robots. Meanwhile, back with the teachers. Is that cheating? Midnight asked. Of course not. All Might answered a bit too quickly. She is simply assisting another participant. She already has more than enough points, so the fact that she is helping others is a sign of a true hero. Yeah, but it's unfair to everyone else, remarked Eraserhead from the back of the room. The brown-haired girl is currently gaining points she doesn't deserve. This is why we put students from the same schools in different testing grounds. All Might scowled. The young lady has already proven she can destroy the robots by herself. Izuka is simply speeding up the process. Nizu sat in the back of the room sipping his tea. I think it's time to release the 0-pointer. Back with Izuka and Achiko after destroying a bunch of robots with Izuka's help, Achiko decided she had done enough and took a break. Hey, Achiko said, looking at Izuka clutching her stomach. Not that I'm complaining, but why are you helping me? Shouldn't you be out getting points yourself? Izuka shrugged. I got enough. Before Achiko could respond, she felt the ground rumble, and this caused her to lose her balance and fall. Suddenly, almost right next to the gravity-defying duo, came the 0-pointer rising out of the ground. Its emergence caused parts of the nearby building to fall off. A few of the pieces almost fell on Achiko, but Izuka pulled her out of the way in the nick of time. After that, Izuka lifted her into the sky next to her. "Thank you," said Achiko, very glad she had not been squashed. Izuka flashed her a smile. After a good amount of time, the test was over. Later Izuka walked out of the gates of U, confident in her results. She was about to walk home when suddenly she heard someone shout, "Hey! Izuka!" Achiko ran up next to her, slightly out of breath. "Hey! I thought we were gonna hang out." Achiko pouted. Izuka stepped back. "Oh. Sorry. I forgot. I'm not really used to people asking me to hang out with them." Achiko flashed her a determined smile. "Well, I can't not hang out with my new friend." Izuka's eyes widened. "We are friends." Achiko looked at her strangely. "Well duh. I'm pretty sure the only reason I passed the entrance exam." Izuka blushed. Never before had she received so much praise from anyone but her brother. "Don't say that. You destroyed plenty of robots on your own." Achiko shook her head. "Yeah, but thanks to you I was able to destroy a bunch more." "But no more buts," Achiko said, interrupting her. "Now you wanna hang out or what?" Izuka looked at her for a second. Bewildered before she smiled. "Sure." Later Izuka and Achiko sat down in a mochi shop and talked. "So why did you help me during the exam?" Achiko asked. Izuka scratched the back of her head sheepishly. "Well, I got more than enough points and you were so nice to me when we met, so I just said why not." "Wow," Achiko responded. "You must be super strong." Izuka flashed her a smug grin. "Yup." Suddenly Achiko's smile disappeared. Hey. So why did you, do what you did with that blue-haired guy?" Izuka sighed. "Let's just say I really hate bullies. After all, one killed my brother." Meanwhile with Izuku. Izuku looked around the now bloody warehouse. He had just finished killing a group of small-time killers and was looking to see if there was anyone he missed. Not finding anyone, Izuku got back on his bike. "Well. You are a hard demon to pin down, Zarathos." Izuku quickly turned his skull behind him to find that the source of the voice was none other than the number 3 hero himself. "Long time no see." Izuku immediately summoned his bike and rocketed away. Hawks was somehow hot on his trail as he was flying much faster than anyone has seen him fly. "Come on Zarathos, I don't have all day," said the winged hero. "Who is Zarathos?" Izuku yelled behind him. "Geez, did Mephisto tell you anything?" Hawks asked. "Who is Mephisto? What are you talking about?" Izuku yelled. Hawks sighed. The hero then proceeded to wrap his wings around himself and disappeared in a puff of feathers. "Ha! Since when could he crash?" Izuku's bike was stopped as Hawks appeared in front of him and held up his foot to keep the wheel from moving. "Chill," Hawks said. "I'm not here to fight." Izuku looked at him cautiously and took his foot off the gas or whatever this thing needed to keep moving. Izuku got off his bike. "You said to the media you were going to deal with me." Hawks waved his hand in a dismissive manner. "Yeah, I just said that make them feel better. It's my job to manage the spirit of vengeance, so I kinda have to keep tabs on you." "What? How do you know about that?" Izuku asked, surprised. Hawks sighed. Suddenly he started to glow in a burst of light. After the light died, Hawks' clothes were replaced by dark armor. "Guess I have to explain some things since Mephisto decided to be even more of an but than normal," Hawks said. Hawks looked around and made sure no one was looking. "Hey, can we have this talk at your place? I really don't need people seeing me talking to you. No offense." Izuku was hesitant. But he needed answers. Who was Mephisto? Who was Zarathos? What was up with that strange armor? Izuku took out his chain and unfolded it. He then swung it around in a circle until the space within the circle began to distort and change and a ring of fire formed in the air. And then the image inside the circle changed and turned into the inside of his base. So you figured out how to make gates. Nice. Hawk said. They walked through and entered Izuku and Eri's humble home. Eri ran to the sound of the portal. Welcome BA-. She took one look at Hawks before hiding behind Izuku's leg. Go away. She yelled. Eri. For now, he is our guest. Please go play in the bedroom while we talk. Izuku said. Eri gave him a worried look. Trust me. Begrudgingly Eri separated from his leg and went away. Cute kid. Hawk said smiling. Is yours. Izuku shook his head. Saved her from the Yakuza. They were doing unspeakable things to her. Hawks nodded. He looked around and saw that they were in Izuku's workroom. Not really a place kids should be around. Hawks remarked looking at the BLD-covered room. Not like I have much of a choice. Izuku shot back. Now start talking. Please. Hawks cleared out his throat. First thing. The person you made a deal with wasn't the devil. What? Yup. The person you made a deal with was Mephisto. He is a lord of hell. God gave him the responsibility of giving the spirits of vengeance host. Spirits. As in more than one. Oh yeah, there used to be a ton of those. They were weapons forged in heaven made of God's wrath and they were put in hell to receive the powers of hell. God then gave Mephisto the job of distributing these spirits to pure souls. Basically, it goes like this. A pure soul dies and God takes it and puts it in purgatory. Then Mephisto comes offers them the power and if they take it they become a spirit of vengeance and rid the earth of all those sinners God hates so much. Wait. If that's true then. Why did Mephisto kill my mother? Oh, that's simple. You see Mephisto is and sometimes while he is giving people the power of the spirit of vengeance he also bonds them with the demon Zarathos which can sometimes give them extra power. However, he doesn't directly say that and will do something that makes whoever he made the deal with miserable for kicks. There was a pause as that info sank in. So you're saying that my mother was killed for fun? Well, I said he was but. Rack. Eri ran back into the room worried for her brother only to find him with his skull erupting in flames. Eri quickly hugged his waist in an attempt to get him to calm down. This worked, sort of. He was still brimming with rage but he no longer looked like he was going to set the room on fire. Izuku, no longer caring about Hawks being here, transformed back into his human state to keep himself from burning the base. Ha! You're just kid. It's rare that we get children as spirits of vengeance. Hawks remarked. After several minutes of Izuku calming himself down, clutching Eri close to him, he asked a question. You said there were other spirits of vengeance. What happened to them? Hawks sighed. Blackheart. He is the son of Mephisto and he absolutely hates his father. So to get back at him he allied with a powerful human who calls himself All for One and together they destroyed almost all the spirits of vengeance. Just as the last one was about the slaughtered he transferred his power to someone else who then escaped. Later on, that person went on to help All Might take down All for One but they were unable to kill him. That person died eventually and the last spirit of vengeance went back to hell and now you have it. This was a lot to take in. Izuku had so many questions but really only one that he needed answered. Okay. How do you know all this? Oh. Yeah. Well, first off my real name is Tzadkiel. And I'm what you would call a fallen angel. You see when the war broke out in heaven I sided with Lucifer. Turns out he was evil so I betrayed him and as punishment for siding with him in the first place, God made me lead Heaven's Black Ops squad with the spirits of vengeance as my weapons. But then I fell asleep and suddenly. Well, you know. Hawks explained. Wait. Izuku stopped him. Are you saying that they all died, because you fell asleep? Yup. Whoops. Hawks shrugged. Izuku didn't really know what to say to that. This was starting to be too much for Izuku to understand. Is there anything else you would like to tell me? Izuku asked, trying to quell his headache by holding Eri closer. Not really. Just that I'm gonna be keeping an eye on you. I really can't have you dying or else God will smite my butt. Hawk said. Right. Izuku nodded. Hawks looked at the two. Eri's face was now buried in Izuku's chest. It was one of the cutest things he has seen in years. Well. Hawk said, stretching his arms. Guess I better go. If you need anything, just open a gate to my place. See ya. And with that, the fallen angel disappeared in a puff of feathers. Izuku sighed. This was too much. There is a demon inside him. He is apparently a weapon of God. He didn't make a deal with the devil, just a demon lord who tricked him into making an unnecessary extra deal. Izuku needed to vent. He needed to get rid of some stress. And there was only one way to do that. Hey, Eri. She looked up at him. Her face still full of concern. I have something you are really gonna like. Have you ever heard of candy apples? Eri's mouth watered. Later. There really was only one way for Izuku to vent. By spoiling Eri. Honestly, there was nothing that made him happier than seeing her smile. Once the candy apples were finished, Izuku took a camera. The look on her face when she bit into the treat was something that almost made Izuku forget about the last hour of expression entirely. Izuku put the picture and put it in his photo book that contained other precious moments from the girl, like the first time she used a computer and Eri's first time trying on new clothes. However, there was one picture Izuku always kept on his person. The first time he gave Eri an apple. The picture was of him holding Eri while she held an apple with a bite mark in it. Her face was filled with indescribable joy as tears of joy rolled down her face. Whenever Izuku was feeling down. Whenever the media was giving him hell. Whenever he encountered villains doing something truly disgusting. Whenever he missed his family. He took out this picture. Of course, he had an extra copy for the photo book, but he still liked keeping it on him. As he watched Eri eat the apple, he felt that innocent blood had been spilled. Izuku sighed. Eri, I'm going out. Meanwhile, a week later with Izuka. Izuka looked proudly at her results. First place. With her combination of rescue points and villain points, she had utterly flattened the competition. She looked at the rest of the results. Achiko had gotten third place. Something Izuka was sure she was happy about. Her eyes scrolled over the list until she found Bakugo. She didn't have to look hard as the boy was only in fourth place. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Suddenly her phone rang. She already knew who it was and answered. Izuka, I passed. Achiko screamed into the phone. Izuka smiled at who excited her friend was. Over the week the two had gotten rather close. Izuka had shown her around the city after hearing that she was new, and the two had a lot of fun. Even if she had only known her for a week, Izuka had gotten really attached to the girl. Perhaps it was because she was the only friend she had ever made, or perhaps it was because she reminded her of her brother in some ways. Either way, Izuka had already deemed the girl her best friend. After all those robots you destroyed, of course you passed. Geez, have some pride, girl. Izuka responded. One trait Achiko had that annoyed Izuka was how humble she was. Yeah, it was good to be a little humble so you don't end up how Bakugo used to be, but Achiko always seemed to doubt herself. It was something that reminded her of her brother in a bad way. Lucky Achiko seemed very bubbly and optimistic, so Izuka didn't have to worry about her going down the same path. I mean yeah, but I was still super nervous, Ochako said. Well, I think we should go out for dinner to celebrate. Izuka said. Sure. Any place you want to go? Ochako asked. How about Hantoni Takai? Izuka responded. What? Isn't that place like super expensive? Ochako asked shocked. Yup. But considering the occasion, I think it's more than worth the money. Izuka responded. In truth, All Might had a lot of money. As the #1 hero, his paychecks were huge, and even though he gave a lot to charity, he still had a whole lot of money. He had given Izuka a debit card with a whole lot of money. So Izuka had a lot of cash. You. I can't let you pay for all that, and I don't have the money to dash, just let me pay. Trust me, I'll be fine. Izuka said, cutting her off. Ochako sighed. She didn't really have a choice in the matter. Okay. The brown-haired girl said, giving in. Izuka smiled. Alright, I'll meet you at your place at 8. They hung up and Izuka went to go find All Might. All Might's apartment was not what you would think it would be. It was rather humble, being a decent size with a bedroom, kitchen, 2 bathrooms, a living room, and a guest room which was now Izuka's room. Izuka walked into All Might's room. It was actually rather plain with not much stuff in it aside from a few photos. All Might was currently taking a nap when Izuka came in and woke him up. Hey, All Might. Me and Ochako are gonna go to Hantoni Takai. Izuka said, informing her legal guardian of her plans. Oh. All right. All Might responded tiredly. He was just happy she had made a friend. Izuka smiled and went off to get ready. Later at Hantoni Takai. Izuka and Ochako had gotten a table. Both of them had felt somewhat out of place in such a high-class environment, although the discomfort quickly dissipated when the food arrived and the two saw why this place was so expensive. So why do you want to become a hero? Izuka asked her friend. Ochako looked up from her food and swallowed. She gave her a worried look. Well, it's not super noble or anything, but I want to get enough money so my parents can live comfortably. I mean, I still want to save people, but my parents have done so much for me, I want to give back. Izuka raised an eyebrow. What are you talking about? That is super noble. Ochako blushed. Really? Izuka nodded. Of course. Ochako smiled, still blushing. Thank you. Why do you want to be a hero? Izuka looked away. She had been avoiding talking about her situation with her family. Or lack thereof. But even if she had only known her for a week, Izuka felt she could tell her. If she wanted to be her friend, she was bound to know anyway, so might as well tell her now. Izuka took in a deep breath. I always wanted to be a hero. It was me and my brother's dream. Oh, you have a brother? Ochako interjected. Izuka gave her a sad look. Had. With that one word, the mood fell and Ochiko's smile disappeared. I'm sorry. Ochako said quickly. I didn't mean to bring up something so painful. Izuka gave her a sad smile. It's okay. You didn't know. After a short pause, Izuka continued. It was mine and my brother's dream to be a hero. My brother just always wanted to help people for no other reason than to help people. I was just going along with him. He was always getting picked on, so it was my first instinct to protect him. I figured if I became a hero too, then I could keep protecting him. Tears were going down her face. But I couldn't protect him from everything. One day all the bullying was just too much for him to take. Some monster told him to jump off the roof and he did. So now I need to be a hero. So that way I can fulfill my brother's dream. Izuka started softly crying. She thought she would be able to confront this. She thought that talking about it would get easier as time went on. But she was wrong. She felt arms wrap around her. She looked up to see Achiko hugging her. Izuka wiped away her tears and smiled. It was so nice to have a friend. Sorry for making this a pity party. Izuka apologized. Achiko looked at her and gave her a sweet smile. It's fine. If any of my family died, I know I would be a wreck for God knows how long. I can only imagine what your family is going through. Izuka's face went dark. Achiko looked at her darkened expression and became confused. My dad died when I was 6, Izuka confessed. And my mother died month after my brother did. Achiko didn't know what to say. So she just hugged her friend. After a few more minutes Achiko sat back down and the two finished their food. As they walked back out Izuka apologized for bringing down the mood. It's fine, Achiko reassured. You must be going through a really hard time and I'm sure you could use a friend. I'm more than happy to help you out. After all, you helped me out a whole lot. Izuka looked at the girl for a second and hugged her. Achiko returned the hug and after a minute they broke apart. After Izuka walked Achiko home she reflected on her life. She had lost a lot. Her dad, her brother, her mother and her home. But she also gained a lot too. A mentor, a new home, a new quirk, a friend. Of course, she still missed her family. But maybe she could cope. Izuka walked home looking forward to what the future had to offer. Izuka walked towards her class with a smile on her face. Her ponytail was wrapped in her usual green bow. Her uniform was immaculate and her face showed no sign of tears. Today was her first day at UA, and she was extremely excited. Finally, she would be able to properly test and improve her skills. Because while All Might's training was good, it was nothing compared to what Izuka assumed training was going to be like. Less excited was Achiko, who Izuka had dragged out of bed early to walk to school with her. Why did we have to come so early? Achiko complained tiredly. Because if we come early then we won't be in danger of being late. Plus we might get brownie points with the teacher. Izuka responded. The two found the door that said 1A. Wow, Achiko said looking at the massive door. It's huge. Izuka shrugged. It probably because some students might have quirks that make them bigger that they can't turn off. Izuka walked through the door expecting the class to be empty. This was not the case however as the blue-haired boy from the entrance exam sitting there. What the hell? Izuka yelled in shock. How did you even get here so early? Achiko exclaimed just as shocked as her friend. A good student must arrive at the earliest time possible. The boy said waving his arms around. Is this guy even human? Izuka and Achiko thought at the same time. The boy rose from his seat and marched up to the two girls before giving an apologetic bow. My name is Ida Tenya and I would like to apologize for being presumptuous the first time we met. Clearly, you two are close friends and you had no intention of disrupting her. He said. Izuka scowled. Of course, he's sorry. Now that he knows how strong I am he wants to get on my good side. Izuka walked past him and sat at. Right answer to that question. Izuka sighed. I did say I would give him a chance. Fine. Izuka groaned. Ida smiled. Well then let us go. We must not be late. Later with Bakugo. Bakugo walked home slowly. Trying to answer a question that has been haunting him as of late. He got home and opened the door. His father was sitting on the couch reading a newspaper which he put down when he heard his son walk in. Katsuki. How was your first day? He asked. It was fine, Katsuki said before walking past his father and into his room. Masaru sighed. One of the many bad things that happened in the wake of Izuku's death was the absence of noise in his household. While most people would love the peace and quiet, Masaru rather enjoyed hearing the voices of his wife and child. Even if they were yelling at each other. But now that was all gone. Now the only sound that came from the Bakugo house was Mitsuki's occasional outburst. The man walked up to his son's room and knocked on the door. It opened due to the fact Katsuki had not fully closed it. Inside was Katsuki laying on his bed staring at the ceiling. Masaru walked over and sat next to his son. "Tell me what's wrong," Masaru said. "Nothing's wrong," Katsuki said in a monotone. There was a pause before Masaru decided on what to say. "Your mother told me what you said to Izuku," Masaru admitted. Katsuki didn't say a word and instead continued looking at the ceiling. "Like your mother said." Masaru continued. "I can't say you're blameless. But you are no more at fault than we are." This made Bakugo look over at his dad in confusion. "Dad? What the F are you talking about? You and Mom didn't do SHTU dash, and that's the point," Masaru said, cutting his son off. "Our son was murdering an innocent boy. For years. And all we did was apologize and say it wouldn't happen again. We filed as parents. And now you're hurting because of it." Masaru put his arms around Katsuki and embraced his son. "Me and your mother refuse to fail you again. She is already trying to fix the mistakes we made. And I have to try as well," Masaru said, tightening the hug. "So please. Tell me what's wrong." How could Katsuki refuse? I don't know what to do," Katsuki admitted. "Izuku wanted me to be a big hero. And now Izuka is trying to get me to be one too. I know I still want to be a hero. But how can I be a hero when I have FBLD on my hands?" There was another pause. "Katsuki. Do you really want to be the kind of hero Izuku thought you could be?" Masaru asked. I do. I think I owe it to him to try. But I don't know how to do it. I was so focused on trying to the best. I thought it was my destiny or some SHT. But because I was like that, Izuku died. So now what? If everything I've spent my life doing leads to that, then what the F am I supposed to do?" Katsuki answered. "Help people," Masaru answered. Katsuki looked at his father, confused at the simple answer. "All Izuku ever wanted was to help people," Masaru explained. "So if you really want to be the kind of hero Izuku could be proud of, all you need to do is help people to the best of your ability." It sounded so simple. But at the same time, it felt so right to Katsuki. "Thanks, Dad," Katsuki said. Masaru smiled. "You're welcome, son."